Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing when I think you should start to teach your kid to read. And so if you enjoy this type of content and other homeschool and lifestyle content, please remember to subscribe and let's get into it. All right, so I feel like this is a very important question for a lot of homeschoolers and even public schoolers, as when should I start teaching my child to read? Obviously, it's a little bit harder to control when your child is in public school. You still can have part control, and I would advocate for control if I was a public school mom, just because I think kids learning to read is very, very important. And so today I'm just gonna share a few viewpoints that I have, explain a little bit of research that I have heard, and then also share a few resources that I like for my kids that we've used a variety of things over the years. What we've liked is that we've taught almost four, like I have 6 kids and we're on the 4th one and she's getting there. She's starting to read a little bit. And so how we've made it work for them. So that's kind of what I'm gonna share with you today. So I wanted to start with a little, like just a small story of a comment I heard several years ago. It was like in 2019. I was at a church, like huge convention thing, and called Time Out for Women, if you're familiar with it. And I was just sitting there, it hadn't started yet, and I was listening to some moms behind me or next to me. I don't know, I was there by myself. And so I wasn't talking to like a friend or anything, I was just listening, and they mentioned something about their kids being in kindergarten, and they're like, yeah, it's so amazing. So this would have been like in February-ish or something, you know, so they've had like 6 months of school. And she's like, isn't it so amazing that they can learn to read so well in kindergarten? I just find it amazing that they're reading so well. And part of me cringed inside and like died a little bit. I really wanted to say, no, that is not a good thing. That's not a good thing that they're learning, like pushing them more towards reading at such a young age. And that story has stuck with me all these years, and I try to think about it when I'm teaching my kids. I am not the perfect example of not pushing my kids. You know, there's good ways to push and there's bad ways to push. And sometimes I feel like, especially with reading, we are not so great at pushing in good ways and really good at pushing in bad ways. And I am totally guilty of that. So this comment has really bothered me because I feel like right before that, I had been reading some different books, and there's research that talks about this. There's lots, even if you just like Googled it, be careful about your sources, but there's lots that talks about how kids in other countries, especially so European countries specifically, not just other countries blanketed, but European countries start reading later. And I even had a comment on one of my last videos, I think the kindergarten do-over video. Someone commented they lived, where did they live? In Canada? It was a different country. And they commented about how they couldn't believe kids started reading so young here. They might have been from a European country. I'm sorry, I can't remember. But I was like, yeah, I think it's weird too that kids, they force it. And when I was a kid, this wasn't the case. Kindergarten was just play. You just had fun in kindergarten and kind of explored your surroundings. There's a lot of imaginative play. You know, yes, we did sit down at tables a little bit, but it was mostly just kind of exploring. And that was what kindergarten was. Well, over the years, it's gotten, in the United States, very intense. And people look at that, a lot of people, especially those that have kids in kindergarten and probably kids that do well in school, and they think, oh, this is so great that my kids are learning to read so young and that they're pushing them so hard to read. And in these foreign countries, in these European countries, these kids aren't really starting to read until like 7-ish years old. And they do as well or better. A lot of their test scores are higher than the United States in a lot of European countries for how well they do in school. And so they start later and they do better than a lot of students here in the United States. And I think that's something to look at and to think about for a second, that we might be pushing our kids a little bit too much when they're younger. And you see the same thing now with sports. I'm not talking about sports today. I could have a whole, like, I don't know, video series on sports stuff, but and I grew up playing sports. But you see the same thing. If they start younger, if we push them harder, they'll become better. And that is false. Okay, yes, for some kids, they can start young and excel and do well. There's a lot of kids that would benefit from just enjoying their childhood and starting to read a little bit older. So take it easy on your kids. If you're homeschooling or if they're in public school and teachers are saying they should be reading, maybe you should pull them out. Or maybe you need to work with them, the teacher, more and say, no, this is fine. It's harder in public school because their program is set up for them to already be readers. And so it's a little bit harder to do something about it there, but there's still things that you could do to advocate for your child. And I feel like you should, because if they are struggling, a struggling reader, then if they're getting pushed in school, they're just going to grow up hating reading, and they're going to think that they are dumb, which most of them, they are not dumb. Hopefully none of our kids are dumb. Obviously they all have issues in some sort of way. All of us do. But we don't want them to grow up thinking that they are dumb. So that's just something so important to remember, is that a lot of times, a lot of kids are not ready to start reading in pre-K or in kindergarten. So let me tell you the philosophy I have adopted for teaching my kids to read, because there is no easy answer. I know people want to come and just like, tell me when it is, tell me when I should start doing it. There isn't an easy answer of when your child should start reading and when you should be pushing it a little bit more. So my idea, and what I kind of have learned over the years, is the same as the way I potty train my kids, which might not be the same as everybody else. But some of my kids were ready to potty train earlier, and some of them were not ready until later. And so a lot of times I would start them, let's go with my last two kids that I potty trained. And my 2-year-old, we're just starting to put him on the potty to see if he's ready, so he'll follow this method as well. But my last two kids, so my third and my fourth one, I was like, okay, let's start. Their sister right before them by 2 years old, she was potty trained, like she would go pee on the potty, but she still had a lot of accidents. And so I was like, okay, we'll try. We'll put you on 2 years old. No, they were just having accidents. They didn't know what they were supposed to do. They weren't like really engaged in the process, and I could see that, okay, from just observing them. I feel like that's one of the things we have to do, is just observe and see like, wait, they're not quite getting this. It's not making sense. And so I try 6 months later, and we see, like, are they a little bit more engaged? Do they get it? Can they even go to the bathroom on the potty? Do they understand that's what they're supposed to be doing? And both of those kids weren't ready until they were a little bit closer to 3 years old. And something shifted. All of a sudden, when we started trying to potty train, instead of me being the one putting them on the potty and them still having a billion accidents, they were like, oh, I need to go to the potty. They were excited to go to the potty. They'd actually go potty in the potty. Okay, so how many times can we say potty in this video? And then they got it. There were still accidents, right? They were not completely ready to just be 100% potty trained. But that's kind of how I did it. It was this like steps process, because they weren't quite ready. It was more work for me, and it was frustrating for both of us if we were doing it before they were ready to be potty trained. The same can be applied to reading. Okay, you look for these cues as you start to read. So I've had my two daughters that I've taught. I have a baby daughter, but my two older ones were both struggling readers. One of them is still learning how to read right now, and she's almost 7. And my boys, my oldest is autistic, but surprisingly, both of my boys actually learned how to read fairly quickly and easily, and it wasn't a super frustrating process for them. But with my girls, my oldest daughter, we tried several things that worked with my boys, and one of the boys is younger than her, and it just wasn't working for her. And at the time, again, I wasn't quite in this mindset that it's okay if she doesn't read till later. I was just like, no. So we kept trying different things, and obviously some things worked better than others, but it just wasn't clicking, right? She wasn't ready for it. She wasn't ready to be potty trained, right? It just wasn't there yet for her. And so with my second daughter, I've been a little bit more lax about, oh, she's not ready. I could see the same patterns that I saw in her older sister, and So we tried a few things and we tried to keep up. Okay, she's finally learning her ABCs. It took her a really long time to learn her ABCs and her numbers. They were very, very hard for her. And then she started finally picking them up when she was around 5 years old. And then math took off for her because she started to understand numbers. And that's what took off. Reading, not so much. She's still right now, still struggles with some of her letters and her sounds. It's really hard for her. And so I was like, okay, what can we work on? So we're still talking about it a little bit, but it's not a focus. So then we just would do like ABC things or ABC games. And we tried like the 100 easy lessons eventually over time. Again, we were incorporating little bits of language arts, but nothing super intensive. You know, there were moments where we tried to be more intense and I could feel we were just both like frustrated. Again, with the potty training, we were both frustrating. She didn't get it. So pull back, okay? And we'll try again. We don't have to completely forget it. We can still talk about it, but we don't have to be so intense about it. And then with my older daughter, eventually it did click. And it took a few years longer than it did for my boys. And now she reads better than my oldest son. Again, is autistic, so it's hard to compare directly with him, but she reads better than him. He can read really well, but she reads very clearly and she devours books. He is starting to devour books a little bit more, but she loves to read so much. And I think about what would have happened if we had pushed her more when she was younger, or even if she had been in a public school system, what would have happened, because she didn't know how to read and it was so hard for her. And now her sister is having similar struggles, sometimes worse struggles. And now she is starting to read. She can put some sounds together. Again, it's still hard. We're barely going through some of the kindergarten stuff and she's almost in 2nd grade. So you can't judge by those things because every kid is different. Some of them will be ready when they're younger and some not. You could just wait with all of them till they're older, till they're 7, and they'll catch up. I promise you they will, because I have seen it with my own kids. My daughter totally has caught up or surpassed her brothers who learned to read sooner than she did. Okay, just because someone learns to read sooner doesn't mean that they're going to be better at it. Sometimes they're gonna be worse or they're gonna hate it more. So those are kind of my life experiences about teaching your kids to read and when to teach your kids to read. The last thing I wanna say before I show a few resources that I do like is let kids be kids. I already sort of mentioned this, how kindergarten for me was a little bit more just explore, use your imagination. And I think that's still very important. So even if you are trying to teach a younger child to read, don't do anything crazy. Just spend a few minutes every day, maybe 5 at the most, and then let them play. Let them explore, because that's really how they're built to learn at this point, is through exploring and touching things and going outside and everything like that. So let them do those things. And I guarantee you will all be much happier because you won't be frustrated and they won't be frustrated, and they'll be ready to read when they're ready to read. So just let them be a kid. Okay, I'm gonna just share a few resources or talk about a few of them. I don't have all of them to share, but I wanna first say different kids might need different things, different curriculums, or they might need them in different orders, or they might need certain things for longer or shorter. You know, you kind of just have to gauge. I know sometimes it feels like a guessing game, and a lot of times it is, but once you find the right thing, you will know it's the right thing, because everything will start working better and you will be less frustrated, and so will your children. So I'm just gonna share a few things. So we've had this book for 7 years, basically. It's almost, are we going into our 8th year? Yeah, in the fall it'll be our 8th year. So we've had it for almost 8 years. It's so hard for me to wrap my head around that. So we've had this book forever, and we have used it with all, like, our 4 older kids. You know, the 2 little ones don't read yet. They're still learning to go potty on the potty. And so this is a really good book, especially if you want to just kind of keep a few concepts fresh in their mind. You will hit a point where they will start reading more throughout this book. And so if you get to that point and your child's not ready, you could stop, you could just go back and review or whatever. So, you know, they're practicing a lot of sounds right here and then starting to combine them. And so I think that helped my daughter a little bit. My husband worked with her on this last fall, and they would mostly just go through sounds, and then they hit some words and it was getting a little bit harder, and then suddenly stuff started to click a little bit better, so we were able to keep going with her normal language arts. But I feel like this is a really good book, especially if you have maybe some younger kids that's showing interest in reading, because they're very, very short lessons, and it's just something you can do every day that you don't really have to think about or anything. You just pull it out, do the lesson, and if they're starting to struggle with it, it's kind of easy to gauge that. And then something else that is fun, we did not get through all of these, and I've only done them with my 4th child because, again, we were trying to fill out some things that might work for her, is these Bob books. And these are the big workbooks, and then you can buy, you know, the smaller Bob books to go with them. So like a page in here will relate to one of the stories, and I think, yeah, it says like what book up here, and then they can practice. So it has some handwriting in it. It also has some reading, you know, they're learning what the people are. This has numbers and different things like that, and this is just the pre-K one. And then they have a I think a kindergarten one. I should have pulled them all out. And then there's another one that we have as well that might be going more into 1st grade type stuff. So that is an option as well. And then just the good and the beautiful. I love their language arts. I love how it's structured, and this is what she's going through right now. We're, I don't even know, maybe a third of the way through this. And then, so we'll keep doing this and then move her into 1st grade, even though she's gonna be in 2nd grade. But again, I'm going at her pace. I don't want her to get frustrated. Sorry, my voice is sounding very special right now. I don't want her to get frustrated. And I don't like being frustrated about it either, especially when there's an easy fix. Just don't do it. And so this is great. Another option that we have used over the years, I haven't used it much recently, but I did enjoy these at one point. But once I got a curriculum that everything was just one thing, that just worked better for me. But these are from Teachers Pay Teachers. They're from the Moffat Girls store. So if I can find them, I'll link them down below. And I just brought up a few. I have a ton of them. But this one, you know, helps them read these words. So you could do 1 a day, 2 a day. You know, it has a few different words here. And then there's also this option. Once they get a little bit better, it has the box it up. So it has the words. It's hard to see with the glare. Sorry, there's the words up here at the top, and then the little boxes. So that helps give them some hints, and then they can see the pictures. And then there's tons of them, right? You could set a whole bunch of them out and have it be kind of a station thing. There's tons of things you could do with like magnet letters, even with these, and you could have them spell these out with magnet letters and then say them. That might be more fun. So there's a variety of things that you could do to make it a little bit more fun and engaging if it's a struggle for them, or if it's something they've already learned not to like very much. So those are just a few of the resources that I like. Let me see if there's other ones. I did mention the Abeka readers, and I haven't used the Abeka like reading curriculum or their language arts. But when my oldest daughter was struggling, I was like, maybe if we just got her some simpler readers that were fairly easy for her to go through, and we just practiced reading those for language arts, because she was reading, she just wasn't reading very well yet, and that's what we did. And so that's the only thing she did for language arts for several months, is we just read a story or half a story from the Abeka readers from like the grade level down from where she was. And that worked really well. It actually is what kind of kicked into high gear her reading. I don't know if it was that exactly, or if it was just taking a break from some of the normal stuff that really helped, but she kind of took off after that. So that is also another option, maybe just getting something a little bit simplified reading, and don't pay so much attention to all the other things like all the grammar rules, all that kind of stuff, but just let them enjoy reading a story. All right, so there was my thoughts and opinions of when I think you should start teaching your child to read. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have additional questions or nice comments, please put them down below. And remember to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.